Thanks very much, Sandra. Bob Carr's always a tough act to follow, but I'll give it a go. So why do we care about population growth? Well, it's pretty obvious. It is the everything issue. It affects every single aspect of our life. Whether how long you spend stuck in traffic, whether you can find a seat on the train, whether you can afford a decent-sized home, a reasonable commute from work. Sorry. There we go. You know, whether or not you're able to water your gardens, in the case of Sydney, whether you can ask for a pay rise because of increased competition in the labour market, and of course environmental amenity. Now, as I'm sure everyone in this room is well aware, Australia's immigration intake has tripled over the past 15 years. So it went from the historical average of around 70,000 per year in the 100 years from the Federation to running by about 210 to 220,000 per year over the past 15 years. Sorry. And this is projected to continue indefinitely, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Now, the ABS releases demographic forecasts. And the one I've got up here is on the right-hand panel is actually the middle forecast. So this is the business as usual forecast. And the ABS has Australia's population rising by 17.5 million people over the next 48 years. A massive increase. So how does this compare historically and compared to other nations? Well, since 2003, Australia's population has increased by 2.5 times the rate of the OECD average. We are by far the fastest growing population in the Anglosphere, and population is extreme. And Australia's major cities are actually projected to double in size over the next half century. So we're going to have Sydney and Melbourne with populations of around 10 million people. Brisbane is going to be a population the size of Sydney, roughly. And Perth is going to be around 4 million people, according to the ABS's middle projection. And as you can see on the right-hand panel here, which just tracks Sydney, all of Sydney's population growth, 4.5 million roughly, is going to come from net overseas migration. So that's both as people step off the plane, as well as have future children. And in fact, without positive net overseas migration, Sydney's population would actually fall slightly. Now, I don't have the chart here, but for Melbourne, it's a very similar story. Without net overseas migration, Melbourne's population would rise by about 500,000 over the next 48 years, versus around 5.2 million under current immigration settings. So Melbourne would more than double in size. And one final point to make is that mid-century, in 50 years, Sydney and Melbourne's population each will be roughly the same size as the entire Australian population was in 1960. So we're going to have two massive metropolises. Now, Bob mentioned it, and it's mentioned in the report, that we're losing the Australian backyard. We're losing our famed quality of life. Now, I've got some projections here which are contained in the report showing Sydney's future dwelling profile. Now, this data comes from the Urban Task Force, which is basically a developer lobby. And currently, around 56% of Sydney's dwellings are detached houses, and around a quarter are apartments. But by mid-century, according to the Urban Task Force, only 1/4 of homes across the entire Greater Sydney area is going to be a detached house, and half are going to be apartments, with the rest townhouses. So what this basically means is that future Sydney-siders are facing a future where only the very wealthiest can afford to live in a detached house with a backyard. It's a complete reversal of what happened a generation ago. And this will all happen by mid-century, in only about 30 years. And as we all know, we see it every day when we drive our cars, catch trains, go to the hospital, send our kids to schools. Infrastructure is not keeping pace. Now, this chart here is not included in the report. This only came out last week. It was by Engineers Australia. And what it shows is that over the past decade of hyper-immigration and hyper-population growth, Australia's infrastructure investment has actually fallen. according to Engineers Australia. Now I've got a quote there, I won't read it out, but you can read it yourself. Basically says that Australia's experienced extreme population growth, yet nothing has kept pace. We have a whole bunch of data in the report from various sources, Infrastructure Australia, Engineers Australia, a whole bunch of other sources, which say exactly the same thing, that Australia's infrastructure is getting further and further behind, and it's all because it cannot keep up with our extreme population growth. That is 2.5 times the OECD average. But that's not all. It's bad now, but the future's actually looking a lot worse. Infrastructure Australia last year released detailed modelling for Sydney and Melbourne. Now, I've included Sydney here in the report. We have both Sydney and Melbourne. And what it shows is that under every single development scenario for Sydney, whether Sydney sprawls, whether it builds up, or does a combination of the two, access to jobs, schools, hospitals, and open space will all get worse. Commute times will rise, as will traffic congestion. That's under every single development scenario from Infrastructure Australia, and that assumes strong infrastructure investment, as we've seen recently. So basically, we'll be going backwards. That is the official modelling from Infrastructure Australia, yet you never hear about it. And one more thing to add, this modelling only goes to 2046. Yet, as I showed earlier, under the ABS's projections, Sydney's expected to go to 9.7 million by 2066. So this modelling only is only for Sydney at 7.4 million. Imagine how bad it's going to get when Sydney gets to project at 9.7 million, as projected by the ABS. So all these figures here will get worse in every single category. And one final point I want to touch on, Bob touched on it, water is the inconvenient truth. Now, Bob touched on the regional centres. I'll focus on Sydney here. Sydney's water supply is plummeting at a rate that is 50% faster than the millennial drought, which finished in 2006. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious. Sydney's population's increased by 1 million since then. Of course, there might be some climate factors, etc., but the big thing is Sydney's population has increased by 1 million, 20% since 2006. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. More people means more water. The average Sydney household consumes about 200 litres a day, or sorry, the average Sydney person consumes on average, I think, 200 litres a day. Well, add 1 million to that, it's a hell of a lot of water. And guess what? As I said, Sydney's population is projected to rise to 9.7 million people. This will basically require a battery of desalination plants to be built right up and down the Sydney coast. There's a problem with that. The chart on the left-hand side shows the cost of desalination. The cost of building and running a desalination plant is 4 times the cost of traditional dam water. So what does that mean? We're going to be building desalination plants, big energy-hungry, energy-sucking, environmentally destroying desalination plants up and down the Sydney coast to cater for a projected almost doubling of Sydney's population. Well, that inevitably means that costs for the typical household will rise. And according to Infrastructure Australia, their modelling, the real cost of water for Australian households, not just Sydney, but Australian households, is projected to quadruple over the next half century. And a lot of that has to do with A, reduced rainfall and evaporation, and B, being required to use technological solutions like desalination, which are incredibly costly to provide the water. But there's also another problem, as Bob mentioned. Regional areas, inner New South Wales, etc., Tamworth, Dubbo, Orange, these types of places, they're not near the ocean. So you can't desalinate to those areas. And also, the lion's share of new arrivals into Sydney are going out to Sydney's west, which is actually quite a long way from the coast, which requires big pipelines to be built, at least 50 kilometres, and also be pumped uphill, which costs a lot of money. These are all issues that none of the policymakers talk about. I'll just leave you with one concluding thought to show the situation that's facing us. It took Sydney 213 years to reach a population of 3.9 million people in 2001, roughly around this time of the Sydney Olympics. Currently, Sydney's population is about 5.2 million. and is projected to hit 9.7 million by 2066. So that means that in 65 years, Sydney's population is meant to be 2.5 times the size it was in 2001, which took 213 years to reach. That is an extremely ridiculous scenario. It's even worse for Melbourne. Melbourne's population is expected to be 3 times the size that it was in 2001 in just an additional 65 years. Now, of course, we're already 18 years along this experiment, and the lived experience has been appalling. We've got congested roads, packed trains, packed schools, packed hospitals. We've got the building of high-rise slums left, right and centre, built to poor quality standards, flammable cladding, basically high-rise dog boxes. As Jeff Kennett once said for Melbourne, he said that he wouldn't let his dog live in them. And of course, in the case of Sydney especially, we've got the rising cost of living. Sydney is the most heavily tolled city in the world in toll roads. And it's just getting worse. Obviously more people requires more expensive tunnelling, more expensive infrastructure, which also results obviously in toll roads, and everyone's average cost goes up. And who's it for? It's not making us better, it's making the fat cats at Transurban richer, and it's making developers richer. So the upshot is that a degraded future is facing Australians. They're going to be living in high-rise dog boxes, paying more for everything, spending longer to commute anywhere, and suffering from a degraded environment. Is this the future we want? No, I don't think so.
Thank you, Leith. We've got time for just a couple of questions, either to Leith or to Bob, if anyone has them. Yes, right at the back. Yes. I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Sorry, currently the plan is for Pathway City out west and to take up population all the way up and mountains down to the Is there any opportunity, questions of politically, try to get a rethink on taking west?
Okay, so it's about the development that's going to go all the way out.
To Wilton. I mean, currently the approach is the Three Cities approach with Grace and Commission. That means going all the way out through mountains. There are Acropolis going all the way down to Wilton.
So you want to know if there's any opportunities to turn it round?
So I guess how do you change that conversation?
How do you change that?
Well, it's the approach of sustainable population Australia. You cannot change it without addressing numbers, because you keep up that super ambitious immigration intake. Leith said this, and I say, as a former planning minister, a former premier, the response is the city goes up or it goes out, or more likely a combination of the two. So there will be a meeting of the relevant committee of the State Cabinet, probably the Budget Committee, where they will look at the projections and they will tick off on options, and those options will be, first, increasing densities within the inner ring and the release of land on the city fringes. When Barry O'Farrell cancelled a sensible plan to lift densities along the North Shore line, Ku-ring-gai, being resisted by the local council, he represented the area in Parliament, a sensible plan to have towers around the railway stations on the North Shore line, as an alternative, of course, to changing the nature of the whole suburb. He rejected that. And when I read that, I thought, well, Barry, as Premier, you've got the power to do it, and you'll get a favourable front page in your local newspaper, and some of your constituents will cheer, but that simply mandates that there will be tens of thousands of additional blocks of land required on the urban fringe. You keep pumping up the population, a city goes up and goes out. It's as brutal as that.
This is a question for Leith. Sustainable Population Australia is a think tank. To get change, you need people in state, federal and local government in elected positions to influence decision makers and bring about change. What do you see the role of a effectively single issue party like Sustainable Australia is in all tiers of government at having some influence at a political level?
Well, before we get on to the Sustainable Australia, I just want to point out, Bob touched on it. The key problem we've got is this vertical fiscal imbalance that's embedded in the Federation. So basically, we've got a situation where the Commonwealth Government collects 80% or 82% of the nation's taxation revenue, whereas the states and local governments collect the remaining 20% roughly. So we've got this situation where the feds run this big migration policy because it benefits the federal budget because they don't pick up the cost. So they gain from the rising company taxes, the rising personal income taxes that comes from more people, but they kick the cost to the state government. Now that is the nub of the issue. You've got this wedge between the two levels, and I think Bob's solution there was have an agreement where for every X number of migrants that come in, the feds have to kick this much money for roads, whatever, is a great idea, because that sort of breaks down this vertical fiscal imbalance. It makes the feds not just pick up the benefits from growth, but also the costs, and will make them rethink their policy. But there needs to be some kind of institution first. So I think that's the key political problem. Obviously, having Sustainable Australia in as many areas as possible is good. I think they're running for local elections now. The problem is that they're having a lot of trouble, obviously, breaking in and getting representation. They've only got one elected representative currently in the Victorian Parliament, and my understanding is, unfortunately, the media doesn't give them a whole lot of sway. So, look, change has got to come from us, demanding more of our elected representatives, and it's also we've got to say got to come from the state government. Bob mentioned that the New South Wales government has said some good things about cities full, etc. That's true, and they did say a lot before the state election. But since the state election here in New South Wales, they've actually gone pretty silent. And Rob Stokes actually attacked baby boomers, I think it was last week, for being NIMBYs and opposing development. And he also, a couple of days ago, said that it's basically impossible to stop growth and that we're just going to put up with it. And that's really the wrong thing that we need from our state governments. True, the feds control immigration policy, but could you imagine if the biggest state government in the country, the centre of political power, properly stood up to the feds and said, cut this. Our citizens do not want this growth. We cannot take it. Put up or shut up. Cut the immigration intake or stump up the funds, and they did it forcefully and they did it consistently. You could actually force the Fed's hands. But unfortunately, since the election, they've sort of gone back into this, we've just got to take it, and it's inevitable. I'm not even sure it's undesirable, this kind of notion. Probably didn't really answer your question, but anyway. Just basically vote for Sustainable Australia. Yes, that's the only thing to say.
Up the back there, question.
My question's for Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr, it's Steve Trask here from Australian Associated Press. I'm sorry to go off on a little bit of a tangent. I wanted to ask you, while I've got the opportunity, for your views on the China-Australia relationship. You changed it all.
Perhaps you can sort of bail him up afterwards on that one, okay? Okay, one more question then on the report, if there is one. Yes, okay.
Are you hearing any positive voices in Parliament up in the sustainability person elected in Victoria? Is there anybody else addressing the issue within the major parties or even the minor parties?
Look, Look, unfortunately, no. Yeah, Clifford Hayes is doing his best down in Victoria, but he's obviously pushing against a massive dam wall, which is about to burst the other way. Look, unfortunately, the only elected representatives who ever raised the immigration issue, and they do it in the wrong way, is One Nation, which yeah, it's great they mention it, but they always do it with racist overtones, nationalistic sentiment, etc. Which is the wrong way to do it, and actually ends up being self-defeating for us, because as soon as we try and raise legitimate concerns, you're shouted down as being a racist or xenophobic, etc. And it's very easy to then play the race card, which is very unfortunate. But apart from them, no, there's not really any other parties. Unfortunately, I'd love to see the Greens actually go back to the Greens of 1996, I think it was, before they changed their policy and population, when they used to have a stable population manifesto. And unfortunately, the rise of One Nation caused the Greens to change their policy because they didn't want to be perceived as racist. And so now the Greens have become a big Australian party as well. So unfortunately, we're definitely up against it. You've got the trifecta of the three majors, all big Australia. You've got obviously some sort of popular sentiments on the right who are pushing back against it, but unfortunately that's, if anything, that could be harming us. We need someone from the centre to push the issue, or alternatively, I'll tell you the secret for Labor getting elected next election: to actually go hard on immigration and do it in the right way. Use it as a way to make, as a housing affordability platform, as a way to support workers and wages. And also on an environmental front. So I'd love to see Labor swing and go for a more sensible intake, but unfortunately, from what I've seen, they're more open borders than the coalition. So yeah, we're up against it.